My children were out of school for summer break, and I somehow had lucked into getting 2 days off in a row from work on a weekend. So I decided to take my children on a little camping trip by the lake about 10 minutes away. We made our way there after I got off work on Friday evening and planned to stay that night and Saturday and come back sometime Sunday. When we arrived, the sun was just beginning to set, so we needed to work quickly to get the tent and the rest of camp set up, and we did. The rest of the campsites were empty, so it was just us out there. We made some ham and cheese sandwiches afterward for dinner and decided to roast some marshmallows on the campfire we created. I was really enjoying this time with my children, and I think they were enjoying themselves as well. Although they did try to venture off into the woods a couple of times before bed that night, which I of course called them back and told them they could explore in the daytime. It was very humid and hot that night, so we kept the windows of the tent unzipped to let the breeze flow through. The kids had drifted off to sleep, and I was just lying there in my sleeping bag inside the tent, looking at the night sky, daydreaming about how I wish we could do this more often. I lowered my eyes to the tree line, which was around 20 feet from the tent, just looking around at the trees. I suddenly noticed what seemed to vaguely be the outline of a person a little ways into the tree line. The moonlight had a hard time cutting through the top of the trees, so it wasn't blatantly obvious, but it really did look like a person. I got up and unzipped the front door of the tent and asked if I could help them. Nothing, no movement, no response of any kind from the figure, so I repeated myself. Still nothing. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. Maybe it's just a large bush or something, I don't know. I made my way to the tree line, at which point the figure darted in the other direction. It was then when I became very frightened. I had no clue who this person was or what they wanted. I had to get my kids and I out of there. If I had called the police, it would have taken them quite some time to arrive. There's no telling what this person might try in that amount of time. I woke up my children, trying to remain as calm as possible, and told them that we needed to go home now. They didn't put up much of a fight really, as they were still half asleep. I led them to the car and got in myself. Screw the tent, I can always buy another tent, I remember thinking to myself. I buckled my seatbelt and started the car. As soon as I did, whoever had been in the trees started running toward the car, from the same area I had previously seen them. I threw it in reverse and started wheeling out of there. He had made it to the car and was banging on the windows really hard as I was trying to maneuver out of the parking spot that was a tight squeeze between several sets of trees. I still never heard him say a word. He was hitting the window so hard that he cracked my driver's side window. He wanted to get to us pretty badly. I finally made it onto the small little road we drove in on and left him in my rearview mirror. Once I was going forward, he didn't really try to get to us anymore. I still have no idea to this day what the hell he wanted or who he was. I even asked around to see if anyone had any similar experiences out there, but no one had. I think I'll stick to camping with lots of other people next time. Of course, never again at that location.
When I was younger, I was involved in the Boy Scouts. When I turned 13 years old, I was old enough to attend the Boy Scouts summer camp that is located in our state. I attended the camp 2 years in a row as a camper, with the only scary thing happening being a bear coming out into our camp and getting into our snack stash. I always had fun at this camp, and decided that when I was 15, I wanted to be a counselor and work there, so I did. At this camp, there was a man who worked for the Boy Scouts that lived on the campgrounds year-round. He had his own house and workshop, and lived there to take care of the camp, maintaining water pipes that pumped water into the campsites, showers, and mess halls. He also maintained anything else that was needed, and he had this job for several years, including the years I had attended being a camper. This man's name was Bill. Bill was an older man, I want to say in his 50s. Bill got along with everybody, and everybody loved Bill. He was always quick to joke around with everyone, and always seemed cheerful with a smile on his face. From the first time I met Bill, I got a sense that he was not everything he seemed to be. I have always been a good judge of character, and when I had uneasy feelings about people, I was generally never wrong. Bill would hang out and do things with other counselors that had worked there in previous years. They would do things like go down to the waterfront and sit on the docks and read out of the Book of Mormon, since a lot of Boy Scouts there were of Mormon faith. As counselors, we worked in different areas of the camps in groups teaching merit badges to the kids that came through the camp. On a weekly rotation, Bill would invite us counselors, according to our areas, into his house on Fridays to have a pizza and movie night. I'm guessing to give that sense of normalcy being indoors and sitting on a couch and watching TV. That was always welcomed since we lived in tents and ate the same food week after week. Our night came to visit his house for movie night, and we of course made our way over there. In his house, the first thing I noticed was the back hallway seemed really dark, like all the windows were shut and the windows were covered up. This seemed strange to me, but no one else questioned it, so I didn't say anything about it. While we were watching our movies and eating pizza, the urge to use the restroom hit me, so I got up and headed for the back hallway, assuming the restroom was that way. But before I could even enter the back hallway, I was stopped by Bill as he came from his kitchen. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him that I needed to use the restroom. He stuttered and stammered over his words as he said the toilet was not working and that I would have to use the porta potties that we used all the time. I was disappointed because I looked forward to using an actual flushing toilet, so I said, "Whatever," and proceeded out of the house to use the porta potty. Fast forward 2 weeks later. My troop would be making their way home at the end of the week, and the next group of scouts would be making their way to camp in the coming week. So I told my parents that I was going to come home so I could rest up in my own bed before heading back to finish out the rest of the summer. The end of the week came, and I was exhausted and ready for a good night's sleep in my actual bed. As I was getting into the van that my scoutmaster drove the scouts up in, I noticed that the police were at Bill's house, and he was being placed into the back of a police car in handcuffs. I, of course, had several questions, but knew that no one in the van would have the answers. It seemed that nobody in our van or my scoutmaster had seen what was going on. The van was loaded, and we hit the road headed for home. The weekend flew by, and my mom drove me back to the camp on Sunday night. She dropped me off, and I walked into the mess hall where we had our Sunday meetings before we got our new group of scouts in camp. I sat down next to some of my friends and asked them if they knew anything about Bill being arrested. There was only speculation, but as it turned out, none of the rumors going around were even true. Our boss came in and quieted us down and proceeded to tell us what had happened to Bill. It turned out that Bill was involved in a child porn ring that involved several other people from all over, but Bill was the last one to actually be arrested. There were a lot of shocked faces in the room, and some of the older counselors that had known Bill for several years tried to defend Bill, claiming that he was innocent. I wasn't shocked. Like I said, I felt there was something off with Bill and never trusted him. They proceeded to tell us that no other campers were involved with the child porn. I think they told us that to try to relieve any worries that people had, but I questioned myself about the showers. There were 2 shower areas, built out of wood, with 2 rooms. One side for the adults, and one side for the youth, each with 8 shower heads and shredded tarps for doorways. There were a lot of holes and gaps in the planks, not to mention that there was no roof on the building, and the shower area was surrounded by several trees. There were also endless places for a camera to be placed. It just goes to show you that even the nicest guy in the room can have a dark secret.
During the summer, my mother threw a big sleepover for my younger sister, who was around 12. I was about 14 at the time. We lived out in the country in a town with a lot of our family around. My sister invited friends to the party, and we set up a big camping tent in the yard and played outside until way after dark, before heading into the tent to watch television on the portable TV. For fun, we left the tent up the next day after everyone had gone home. That evening, my grandmother had started having some medical issues, so my mother and 2 older sisters went to take her to the hospital, leaving my younger sister and I home. We always thought our area to be safe because nothing ever happened there. Night fell and my sister and I stayed out in the tent watching a movie. All the lights in the house were on and the front door was wide open, but the tent door and windows were zipped to block out the draft. My sister fell asleep, but I stayed up watching the movie. I was relaxing when I saw what looked like a human shadow passing by the tent. I shrugged it off, thinking it was one of the hanging plants swinging. I don't scare easily, and always reasoned with bumps in the night, but I saw the shadow again. I realized then that it might have been my uncle looking for his puppy, who had wandered over during the sleepover to play with our dogs. I once again ignored it until the area of the tent my sister was sleeping in swelled like the wind had blown through, only realized that the tent was zipped and there was no way the wind could have done it. It was like someone was pulling on the outside of the tent wall. Stopping the movie, I slithered over to my sister and put my hand over her mouth and shook her awake. I then dug for the cordless phone in the blankets. Finding it, I called my mother and whispered her frantically that someone was outside, trying to get into the tent. My sister was fully awake by then, and I kept telling her to keep quiet, though I knew the person outside would have already seen our shadows, thanks to the light from the television. I am in the middle of telling my mother what is happening when the shadow passes by again, and my sister and I let out screams from our fear of the situation. My mom called a neighbor to come get us. The neighbor picked us up and we waited at her house for my mom. Mom arrived and spoke to the neighbor, who said she hadn't seen anyone when she arrived. When we made it back home, we found the house still lit and nothing tampered with, until we checked the tent. Everything in the tent, blankets and snacks, among other things, had been shoved to the walls of the tent, and in the bare center of the floor was my uncle's puppy. It was dead. It looked like it had been stabbed or something in its stomach. My mom filed a police report, but nothing came of it. After that, needless to say, I don't camp anymore, even if it is a few feet from my house.